I stared at the black leather folder in the restaurant manager's trembling hands. Inside that elegant little book was a piece of paper demanding $15,800. The entire rooftop terrace was dead silent. The soft jazz music playing in the background suddenly sounded like a funeral march. Across the room, at a massive table overflowing with crystal glasses, expensive floral centerpieces, and half-eaten gold leaf steaks, sat my family. They were staring at me. My younger sister, Cressida, who just 2 hours earlier had looked me dead in the eye, smirked and said those exact words. "Sorry, this VIP table is for family only." She had pointed her perfectly manicured finger toward a rusted metal folding chair wedged next to the swinging kitchen doors. A chair that smelled like old dishwater, bleach, and discarded seafood. She had banished me to the trash, and my parents had laughed. They all laughed. Now, the laughter was gone. The bill had arrived. And the manager was looking at me, the person whose corporate credit card was supposed to bankroll this entire charade. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The anger burning in my chest was a living, breathing thing. How did I get here? Why did I let them treat me like a human ATM, like a stray dog begging for scraps of affection? It is a sickness, wanting your family to love you. It makes you blind. It makes you weak. But sitting there, listening to the clattering of pans from the kitchen, something inside me finally snapped. Have you ever felt like you were walking right into a trap, but you still blindly agreed because of the word family? Let me know in the comments. Because that is exactly what I did, and swiping that card was the worst and best mistake of my entire life. It all started exactly 1 month ago. My name is Veda. I am 33 years old. I spend my days surrounded by diesel fumes, shipping manifests, and weary truck drivers. I own a mid-sized freight brokerage and logistics firm called Vanguard Logistics. It is a gritty, high-pressure industry. It is not glamorous in the slightest. I do not wear designer clothes to work. I drive a 5-year-old pickup truck because it is practical for navigating loading docks and warehouse bays. And because of this, my family has always treated me like a peasant who somehow stumbled into their imaginary royal court. They love the money I make, but they despise how I make it. I was sitting in my truck at the main dispatch yard, reviewing a massive transport contract that was about to change the trajectory of my entire business. The smell of exhaust and burnt rubber was heavy in the air. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. The caller ID flashed with my mother's name, Althea. I hesitated before answering. Calls from my mother never meant she wanted to know how my day was going. Calls from my mother meant she needed something. She usually needed funding for whatever new fantasy my sister was spinning. I picked up the phone. "Veda, darling," her voice dripped through the speaker, coated in that fake, sugary sweetness she only used when she was about to ask for a favor. "Are you still playing around with those dirty trucks at the yard?" I gripped the steering wheel tight. "I am working, Mom. It is a logistics company. What do you need?" She sighed, a long, dramatic sound designed to make me feel small. "Well, I just have the most wonderful news. Your sister is officially engaged to Lachlan. We are beyond thrilled. His family is just, well, they are very established. Very high society. I knew Lachlan. He was a quiet, polite guy who came from serious commercial real estate money. I always wondered what a grounded guy like him saw in Cressida. She was a 28-year-old self-proclaimed lifestyle consultant who spent most of her time filming unboxing videos for an audience of fake followers while drowning in credit card debt. But that was not my business. "That is great, Mom," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Tell her congratulations." "I will," she said quickly. "But Veda, we are planning a massive engagement dinner. We want to impress his parents. We are booking the private terrace at Laura downtown." Laura was notoriously expensive. The kind of place where a single cocktail cost more than a tank of gas. "Okay," I said cautiously. "Have a good time." "Actually, sweetheart," her voice dropped an octave, adopting a tone of helpless desperation. "We need a tiny favor. The restaurant requires a deposit to secure the terrace. It is $3,000. Your father and I have our funds tied up in some investments right now, and Cressida is saving every penny for the wedding. Could you just put your card down for the deposit? Just to hold the room. We will handle the rest on the night of the dinner. I closed my eyes. The familiar sting of being used washed over me. Tied up in investments meant they had just bought a new luxury SUV they could not afford. Cressida saving meant she had maxed out her cards on cosmetic procedures and designer shoes. They needed my money, but they were ashamed of my blue-collar empire. Mom, $3,000 is a lot for a deposit. Are you sure you can cover the actual bill? A party of 20 at Laura is going to be astronomical. Veda, please do not lecture me about finances, she snapped, the sweet facade cracking instantly. It is your sister's special day. Can you not just be supportive for once in your life? Do you always have to be so difficult and unrefined? We are just asking you to hold the reservation. That was their favorite word for me. Unrefined. Because I built a business from the ground up instead of marrying into money or pretending to have it. I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone. But the twisted, pathetic part of me that still craved my mother's approval whispered that maybe, just maybe, if I did this, they would finally include me. They would see me as an equal. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. I will call the restaurant and give them my corporate card for the deposit. But I am not paying for the dinner. Of course not, darling. She chirped, instantly sweet again. We cannot wait to see you there. Wear something nice, please. Try not to look like you just crawled out from under a truck. She hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat in the cab of my truck, staring at the dusty windshield, feeling a heavy pit in my stomach. I pulled out my corporate expense card and called Laura. I authorized a $3,000 pre-charge to secure the terrace. I thought I was buying a seat at the table. I did not know I was funding my own public execution. To understand why I stayed in that restaurant, why I endured what happened next instead of just turning around and walking out, you have to understand the museum of pain that was my childhood and early adulthood. You do not just wake up one day and accept being treated like garbage. It is a slow, methodical conditioning. A chipping away of your self-worth over decades until you believe that you only exist to serve the golden child of the family. Let me give you a tour of this museum. Exhibit A. I was 22 years old. I had just graduated college, drowning in student loan debt because my parents refused to help me. They claimed they needed to focus on Cressida's private high school tuition and her expensive extracurricular activities. I had lost my tiny apartment and was living out of a beat-up sedan. I swallowed my pride and drove to my parents' 4-bedroom suburban house. I begged my father, Orson, to let me sleep in the detached garage for just 1 week until I got my first paycheck from a night shift dispatching job. Just the garage. I did not even ask for a room inside the house. My father stood on the front porch, holding a crystal glass of scotch, looking at me like I was a stranger asking to use his bathroom. Veda, we really cannot do that, he said, shaking his head with a look of mild annoyance. Cressida is going through a very stressful phase right now. She needs the garage to practice her hot yoga and center her mind. Having you out there shuffling around would ruin her energy flow. You need to figure this out on your own. It builds character. I slept in my car in a store parking lot for a week in the freezing November rain. I remember shivering under a thin, cheap blanket, watching the taillights of cars passing by on the highway, wondering why my sister's energy flow was more important than my physical safety. That was the week I learned that my survival meant nothing if it inconvenienced her comfort in the slightest way. Exhibit B. 5 years later, I was 27. After years of grinding, saving every single penny, and sleeping 4 hours a night, I finally opened my own small logistics office. It was tiny. Just a rented room in a rundown strip mall with 2 used desks and a refurbished computer. But it was mine. I was so incredibly proud of what I had built with my own 2 hands. I bought a cheap bottle of champagne and invited my parents and Cressida to come see it on opening day. I bought plastic cups and waited. I waited from noon until 6 in the evening. Nobody showed up. Nobody called. I drank a warm cup of cheap champagne by myself, looking out the window at the empty parking lot. Later that night, I checked social media. Cressida had posted a photo of a brand new, $4,000 designer French bulldog pup. The caption read, "Mom and Dad bought me the best early birthday present ever." Family shopping day was a success. They skipped the opening of my business to buy her a dog. When I confronted my mother about it the next day, she acted deeply offended. Veda, a business opening is just a room with some desks. Cressida was having a mental health crisis because her friends all got puppies and she felt left out. We had to be there for her. Do not be so selfish and demanding of our time. Exhibit C. The present day. Our family group chat. It is a digital monument to my invisibility. 2 weeks before the restaurant incident, I secured a massive logistics contract. A turning point for my company that pushed our valuation past the $4 million mark. I was so excited I broke my own rule and texted the group chat. Just signed a huge deal. Taking the team out to celebrate tonight. Hope everyone is having a great week. I watched the read receipts pop up. Mom read it. Dad read it. Cressida read it. Silence. 2 hours went by. Not a single word of congratulations. Not even a thumbs up emoji. Then, Cressida sent a photo of a metallic luxury handbag. Ugh, guys, tell me if this bag makes me look too pale. Lachlan's mom has one and I need to compete with her style. Instantly, the chat exploded. My dad sent fire emojis. My mom wrote 3 paragraphs about how stunning she was and how Lachlan's family would be so intimidated by her natural beauty. My message about the biggest achievement of my career was buried under a mountain of praise for a piece of leather. Cressida was not just spoiled. She was maliciously vain. She built her entire identity on being better than me. She needed me to be the failure so she could shine brighter. I remember a holiday dinner where she brought her influencer friends over. I walked in wearing steel-toe boots because I had just come from an emergency at the warehouse. She looked at my boots, then looked at her friends and laughed loudly. "Oh, ignore my sister," she announced to the room. "She is in her blue-collar era. We are hoping she discovers fashion eventually." I just stood there and took it. I always took it. I thought that if I never reacted, if I just kept my head down, worked hard, and paid the bills when they asked, they would eventually realize my worth. I thought patience was the same thing as dignity. I was wrong. Taking the high road with toxic people does not lead to respect. It just gives them a clearer shot at your back. And on the night of the engagement dinner, they did not just shoot me in the back. They tried to bury me entirely. If you are enjoying this story so far and want to hear how this all blows up in their faces, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. The night of the dinner, I wanted to prove I belonged. I spent 2 hours getting ready, trying to wash the smell of the freight yard off my skin. I wore a sharp, tailored navy suit that fit me perfectly. I got my hair done. I went to a high-end liquor store and bought an $800 bottle of vintage red wine as a gift for Lachlan and Cressida. I wanted to walk in there and show Lachlan's wealthy parents that Cressida's family had class. That I had class. I pulled up to Laura in my old truck, ignoring the sneer from the valet, and handed him the keys. I took the glass elevator up to the rooftop terrace. The doors opened, and the atmosphere hit me immediately. It was stunning. Dripping in modern luxury. Panoramic views of the city skyline, low ambient lighting, and live jazz floating through the warm evening air. I saw them immediately. The private VIP section was roped off with velvet cords. A massive, beautiful table set for 20 people. The floral centerpieces alone must have cost a small fortune. Everyone was already seated. Lachlan's parents, looking elegant and composed, sat at one end. My parents sat at the other, laughing loudly, holding crystal champagne flutes. And in the center, wearing a glittering dress that practically screamed for attention, was Cressida. I took a deep breath, pasted a polite smile on my face, and walked over. I clutched the expensive wine bottle, ready to offer my congratulations and take my seat. Cressida saw me first. The laughter died on her lips. She looked me up and down, taking in my tailored suit. For a split second, I saw a flash of pure, unfiltered annoyance in her eyes. She did not want me looking good. She did not want me looking like someone who belonged at that table. She stood up. The entire table turned to look at me. The silence was sudden and heavy. "Oh, hey Veda," Cressida said, her voice carrying just loudly enough for everyone, including Lachlan's parents, to hear. She did not look at the wine in my hand. She looked at me like I was a pest that had scurried in from the street. "Congratulations, Cressida," I started to say, stepping forward to hand her the bottle. She held up a hand to stop me. Then, a slow, malicious smirk spread across her face. "Sorry, this VIP table is for family only." I stopped dead in my tracks. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for her to laugh, break the tension, and tell me my seat was over by Mom. But she did not. Instead, she lifted her perfectly manicured finger and pointed across the room. I followed her gaze. Over by the swinging double doors of the kitchen, far away from the beautiful terrace view, far away from the floral arrangements and the crystal glasses, was a small, rusted metal folding chair. Next to it was a tall plastic trash can. The door swung open, and a waiter rushed out, bringing with him the strong smell of bleach and burnt garlic. "We just did not have enough room at the main table," Cressida said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "We had to make room for Lachlan's important business partners. But the manager was sweet enough to set up a little spot for you right over there. It is cozier anyway, right?" My brain short-circuited. I looked at my mother. Althea was deliberately inspecting her fingernails, avoiding my eyes entirely. I looked at my father. Orson chuckled, a nervous, cowardly sound, and raised his glass to me. "Make room for the important folks, Veda. You know how it is. Just grab a seat over there. We will catch up later." I looked at Lachlan. He looked incredibly uncomfortable, his brow furrowed in confusion, but he did not say a single word to defend me. His parents watched the exchange with blank, unreadable expressions. And then a few of Cressida's friends at the table actually laughed. A low, mocking giggle that rippled through the group. The heat rushed to my face. My ears were ringing. I was 33 years old, a CEO, a woman who commanded respect in boardrooms full of aggressive men. But standing there under the crushing weight of my family's public disdain, I felt exactly like that 22-year-old girl shivering in her car. I was paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the humiliation. I did not scream. I did not throw the $800 bottle of wine at the wall. My throat closed up so tight I could barely breathe. I nodded mechanically. I turned my back on the laughing table, walked over to the swinging kitchen doors, placed the vintage wine on the floor next to the trash can, and sat down on the cold metal folding chair. I sat there for 2 hours. 120 agonizing minutes. The cold metal of the chair dug into my back. Every time the kitchen doors swung open, waiters bumped past me, carrying trays of exquisite food. They looked at me with a mixture of confusion and deep, uncomfortable pity. I was the ghost at the feast. A woman in a sharp suit, sitting by a trash can, staring straight ahead. No one brought me water. No one offered me a menu. I watched from 50 feet away as my family toasted. I watched them eat towers of fresh seafood and Wagyu beef. I watched Cressida stand up and give a tearful speech about how blessed she was to be surrounded by people who supported her dreams. I watched my mother cry and hug Lachlan's mother. It was a perfect, sickening performance of high society grace, funded by the credit card in my pocket. My stomach gnawed with hunger, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional suffocation. Why was I staying? Because I was frozen. Because a sick, broken part of me still believed that if I caused a scene, I would be the villain. My mother would say I ruined the engagement. My father would say I was unhinged. I was trapped in the role they assigned me. But then, the universe handed me a gift wrapped in the smell of dish soap. 2 servers pushed through the kitchen doors and stopped a few feet away from me to organize a tray of dirty glasses. They did not notice me sitting in the shadows next to the trash bin. "I cannot believe that bride at the main table," one server whispered, aggressively wiping a glass. "Did you hear how she talked to the general manager earlier?" "I know," the other server replied, rolling her eyes. "She is a nightmare. And getting him to haul that ugly folding chair up from the basement? Pure evil." The GM told her we had plenty of room to add another luxury chair to the main table, and she specifically told him no. She said, "Put a cheap plastic or metal chair by the kitchen. I do not want her ruining the aesthetic of my photos." My blood ran cold. The ringing in my ears stopped entirely. And the way she is bragging to the groom's parents? The first server continued, shaking her head. I poured their wine, and she was going on and on about how she rented the whole terrace herself. How she loves spoiling her family. Meanwhile, the deposit is sitting on a corporate card under a completely different name. Whoever that beta person is, they are getting scammed blind. The servers grabbed their trays and walked away, disappearing back into the loud kitchen. I sat there, perfectly still. The sadness evaporated. The desperate, pathetic longing for my family's love vanished, burning away in the white-hot inferno of absolute clarity. It was not an oversight. It was not a lack of space. It was a premeditated execution. Cressida had gone out of her way to ensure I was humiliated. She had engineered this torture just to make herself feel superior, all while using my money to play the role of the generous, wealthy socialite for her future in-laws. She was standing on my neck to make herself look taller. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were no longer shaking. They were steady. Ice cold. I opened my messages and found the thread with Talia. Talia was not just my best friend. She was the ruthless, brilliant corporate lawyer who helped me build Vanguard Logistics. She knew everything about my family. She had been begging me to cut them off for years. I typed out a single sentence. Time to pull the plug. Talia replied immediately. Finally. Give the word. I looked across the room. Cressida was throwing her head back, laughing at something Lachlan's father had said. She looked so triumphant. So untouchable. She thought I was just the ugly duckling paying her bills. She thought she had won. She did not know that she was swiping a card attached to my name, my business, and my absolute control. She did not know that I had my finger hovering over the kill switch. I put my phone away. I sat up straight, crossing my legs. I did not feel humiliated anymore. I felt like a predator watching a very stupid rabbit dance in a snare. I was going to let her eat her dessert. I was going to let her enjoy the peak of her fake glory. And then I was going to burn her kingdom to the ground. Eventually, the empty plates were cleared away. Elaborate desserts adorned with spun sugar and edible gold were brought out to the main table. The jazz band started playing a slow, romantic melody. The sky above the terrace turned a deep, inky black, scattered with bright city lights. It was a picturesque ending to a picturesque lie. And then, the moment of truth arrived. I watched the general manager, a tall man in a pristine tailored suit, walk toward the VIP table. He was holding a sleek black leather folder. He stepped up to Cressida and Lachlan, leaning in politely, and murmured something. Cressida did not even look at him. With an arrogant flick of her wrist, she waved him away and pointed a long fingernail straight in my direction. I saw the manager's face fall. He looked deeply uncomfortable. He looked at the wealthy parents, looked at the laughing bride, and then looked across the vast expanse of the floor at the woman sitting by the garbage can. Slowly, reluctantly, he began the long walk toward me. Every eye at the VIP table followed him. My family was watching me with identical expressions of smug anticipation. They were waiting for me to quietly pull out my corporate card, pay for their extravagance, and slink away into the night like a good little scapegoat. The manager stopped in front of me. He looked at the rusted folding chair, looked at my tailored suit, and swallowed hard. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice full of genuine apology. "The bride directed me to bring the final bill to you. The total for the event, minus the $3,000 deposit, is $12,800. The grand total is $15,800. Would you like me to run the card on file for the remaining balance? $15,800. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I smiled. A calm, slow, terrifyingly measured smile. I stood up. I took my time. I smoothed the lapels of my jacket. I picked up the $800 bottle of wine from the floor. And then I walked. I did not walk out the door. I walked straight toward the VIP table. The manager trailed nervously behind me. As I approached, the chatter at the table died down. Lachlan's parents looked confused. My parents looked slightly alarmed. Cressida's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly forced it back. I stopped right behind Cressida's chair. I looked down at the black leather folder in the manager's hand. And then I spoke. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden quiet of the terrace, it rang out like a gunshot. Not my table. I used the exact same condescending tone Cressida had used 2 hours ago. I looked directly into my sister's widening eyes. I was told this table was for family only. I sat by the trash. I did not eat. I did not drink. I am not part of this party. So, I will not be paying. The silence that followed was so profound you could hear the traffic on the street 10 stories below. My brother-in-law-to-be, Lachlan, dropped his dessert fork. It hit the china plate with a sharp clink. My mother's face went white. My father's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. Cressida's face flushed a violent, ugly red. "Veda, stop making a scene," she hissed, her voice trembling with sudden panic. "Stop being so dramatic and just pay the bill. We agreed on this." "No, Cressida," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "Mom asked me to put my card down for a deposit to hold the room. That is all. But considering the hospitality I received tonight, I have decided to rescind that offer entirely." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had already dialed the emergency fraud line for my corporate bank account while the manager was walking over. The operator was waiting. I put the phone on speaker and held it up. "Yes, hello," I said clearly into the phone. "This is Veda, CEO of Vanguard Logistics. I need to report a fraudulent pre-authorization on my corporate account at Laura Restaurant for $3,000. The service was not rendered to me, and the card is being used without my consent. Cancel the authorization immediately and freeze the card." "Understood, ma'am," the robotic voice of the bank operator echoed out of the phone for everyone to hear. "The $3,000 hold has been voided. The card is now locked." I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. The manager looked at his handheld terminal. It beeped a loud, angry red sound. The deposit was gone. The full $15,800 was now unpaid. I looked at Cressida. Her eyes were bulging. The sheer terror of being exposed was ripping her fake composure to shreds. So I said, turning to walk away, "You get to figure it out. You and your real family. Enjoy the aesthetic." I turned my back on them and took 3 steps toward the elevator. I thought that was it. I thought I would just leave them to squabble with the manager and pay their own massive debt. But the real nightmare for my sister had not even started. Because before I could reach the elevator doors, a deep, commanding voice stopped me in my tracks. "Wait a moment." It was Lachlan's father, Evander. Evander was a man who commanded a room without even trying. He was a titan in the commercial real estate world, known for his ruthless pragmatism and sharp eye for detail. Throughout the entire dinner, he had been quiet, observing everything with a detached, polite interest. Now he stood up. He did not look at his son. He did not look at my parents. He did not even glance at Cressida, who was currently hyperventilating in her luxury chair, desperately clutching her useless Prada bag. Evander walked past the extravagant floral centerpieces, past the frozen waiters, and stopped right in front of me. He looked at my tailored suit, then looked past me toward the rusted folding chair by the kitchen doors. A dark, stormy expression crossed his face. He extended a large, firm hand toward me. "Miss Veda," Evander said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I thought I recognized you when you walked in, but I could not fathom why the CEO of Vanguard Logistics would be seated by the garbage bins. It is a shock, truly." I took his hand and shook it firmly. "Mr. Evander, it is a surprise to see you here as well outside of the boardroom." A collective gasp echoed from the table. My mother choked on her saliva. My father grabbed the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Cressida looked like she had just been struck by lightning. They had no idea. They thought I was a low-level dispatcher. They thought I drove the trucks. They never bothered to ask the actual name of my company, let alone look into my client list. They did not know that just last Friday, Evander's massive real estate development firm had signed a $4.5 million freight and transport contract with Vanguard Logistics to supply materials for his new high-rise project. I was not just a business owner. I was his primary logistical partner. Evander turned his piercing gaze toward my parents. The look of disgust on his face was palpable. "We just signed a massive strategic partnership on Friday," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ms. Veda is one of the most respected, self-made logistics executives in this city. And yet, I sit here and watch her own family treat her like a stray dog. I watched you banish my business partner to the kitchen and then expect her to foot the bill for your arrogance. Evander, please, there is a misunderstanding." My mother shrieked, her voice cracking in panic. "We did not know. I mean, Veda never told us she was." "Because you never cared to ask, Althea," I interrupted, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You only care about what people can buy for you." Evander shook his head in disgust. He turned back to the table, looking directly at Cressida. "Cressida," Evander said, his tone chillingly calm. "For the past 2 hours, you have been sitting at this table boasting to my wife and me. You explicitly told us that you were paying for this entire evening. You said you rented this terrace with your own money to treat your family because your consulting business was booming. Was that a lie?" Cressida was trembling violently. The glittering facade had shattered, leaving behind a terrified, pathetic liar cornered by her own vanity. I meant, I was going to pay," she stammered, tears ruining her expensive makeup. Lachlan stood up. He looked sick to his stomach. He looked at the girl he was supposed to marry as if he was seeing a stranger. "You lied to us, Cressida? You humiliated your own sister, shoved her in a corner, and then tried to steal the credit for her money to impress my parents?" "Lachlan, baby, no. She is trying to ruin us. Veda is just jealous." Cressida screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She canceled the card on purpose to embarrass me. I can pay. I have the money." She frantically dug into her Prada bag and pulled out a gold-colored credit card. She practically threw it at the restaurant manager, who was standing frozen nearby. "Run it," she shrieked. "Run the $15,800 on my card right now. Show them I do not need her dirty truck money." The manager hesitated, looking at Evander, who gave a brief, cold nod. The manager pulled out his wireless terminal. He typed in the massive amount. He inserted Cressida's gold card. The entire terrace held its breath. The silence was agonizing. You could hear the faint whirring of the machine processing the data. Cressida stood tall, trying to regain her arrogant posture, wiping her tears away. She glared at me, a look of desperate, spiteful triumph forming on her face. She was convinced this would save her. She was convinced her credit limit would protect her lies. The machine beeped. A loud, sharp, unforgiving error tone. The manager looked at the screen. He looked up at Cressida, his face devoid of sympathy. "I am sorry, miss," the manager said clearly. "The transaction has been declined. The system says the card is over its limit." Cressida's jaw dropped. The triumphant look vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated horror. The gold card was maxed out. The illusion was dead. The wealthy socialite was officially exposed as a fraud who could not even afford the appetizers she had just eaten. The machine beeped again. A loud, sharp, unforgiving error tone that echoed across the quiet rooftop terrace. The restaurant manager looked at the small digital screen. He looked up at my sister, his face entirely devoid of sympathy. "I am sorry, miss," the manager said clearly, his voice carrying over the gentle jazz music. "The transaction has been declined. The system says the card is over its limit." Cressida's jaw dropped. The triumphant, spiteful look she had worn just seconds ago vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated horror. The gold card was maxed out. The illusion was dead. The wealthy, successful socialite was officially exposed as a fraud who could not even afford the expensive appetizers she had just eaten. Lachlan stood frozen, staring at the declined card in the manager's hand. He turned his head slowly to look at Cressida. His voice was barely a whisper, but in that silent space, it sounded like thunder. "What else have you lied about, Cressida?" I did not lie," Cressida shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical frequency. "It is just a bank error. My consulting business is waiting on a massive invoice to clear. Veda is just doing this to sabotage me because she is a miserable, lonely woman who drives trucks for a living." She was still trying to attack me. Even as her ship was sinking into the ocean, she was trying to drag me down with her. But I was not the same woman who had walked into this restaurant 2 hours ago. I was no longer the punching bag. I reached into the inside pocket of my tailored navy suit and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. "Since we are putting everything on the table tonight," I said, my voice cutting through her hysterical screaming like a sharp blade. "Let us talk about your booming business, Cressida." Earlier that week, my corporate lawyer and best friend, Talia, had insisted on running a full financial background check on my family. I was preparing to reorganize the corporate structure of Vanguard Logistics, and Talia wanted to ensure there were no hidden liabilities tying my assets to my parents or my sister. What she found was a financial horror story. I had printed one specific document and brought it with me, just in case my sister tried to play the victim. I walked over and handed the folded piece of paper to Lachlan. He took it hesitantly, unfolding it under the warm amber glow of the terrace lights. "What is this?" Lachlan asked, his eyes scanning the black and white text. "That," I said calmly, "is a pawn shop receipt from a dealer on the east side of the city. Dated 3 days ago." Lachlan's mother, who had been sitting in stunned silence, suddenly gasped and stood up from her chair. She pointed a trembling finger at the glittering diamond brooch pinned to the front of Cressida's expensive silk dress. "Lachlan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The brooch." Lachlan looked from the receipt in his hand to the jewelry on Cressida's chest. The receipt detailed the exact description of a vintage, platinum-set diamond floral brooch. It had been pawned for $2,500. The exact amount of money Cressida had needed to purchase her designer engagement dress. Cressida covered the brooch with both hands, stepping back as if she had been burned. No, it is a mistake," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room looking for an escape. "Take it off," Lachlan demanded. His voice was no longer polite. It was hard, cold, and final. "Take it off right now, Cressida." When she refused, sobbing uncontrollably, Lachlan stepped forward and unpinned it himself. He handed it to his mother. The older woman held it up to the light, turning it over in her hands. She let out a sound that was half sob, half disgusted laugh. "It is cubic zirconia," Lachlan's mother said, dropping the fake jewelry onto the table where it clattered against a crystal glass. "It is a cheap replica. She pawned my grandmother's heirloom to buy a dress and bought a fake to wear tonight to fool us." The entire table erupted into chaos. My mother, Althea, buried her face in her hands, weeping loudly. My father, Orson, was staring at the floor, too cowardly to even look Evander in the eye. Evander just stood there, his arms crossed, shaking his head in profound disgust. Lachlan stepped back from Cressida. He looked at her as if she were a venomous snake. "You pawned my family's heritage. You treated your own sister like garbage. You lied to my face for months." He reached for her left hand. Before she could pull away, he slid the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. "We are done," Lachlan said. "There will be no wedding. Do not ever contact me or my family again." What do you think Lachlan should have done in this moment? Should he have given her a chance to explain, or was walking away immediately the right call? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I know people have wild opinions on family betrayal. Lachlan turned to the restaurant manager. "Sir, my family will pay for half of this bill, as we consumed half the meal. The rest is her responsibility." He gestured to Cressida, who had collapsed into her luxury chair, sobbing hysterically into her hands. Evander looked at me one last time, giving me a short, respectful nod. "Have your legal team send over the final logistics addendums on Monday, Ms. Veda. We have a lot of profitable work to do." "I will see it done, Mr. Evander," I replied. Lachlan and his parents turned and walked out of the VIP terrace, leaving my family sitting in the ruins of their own making. I did not stay to watch them figure out how to pay the remaining $7,900. I turned around, walked past the rusted folding chair by the kitchen, and took the elevator down to the street. When I got into my old, reliable truck and gripped the steering wheel, I did not cry. For the first time in 33 years, I felt incredibly, wonderfully light. You would think that after a public humiliation of that magnitude, my family would retreat into the shadows. You would think they would take a long, hard look in the mirror, reflect on their actions, and perhaps offer a genuine, heartfelt apology. But toxic people do not reflect. Toxic people retaliate. The weekend passed in beautiful, blissful silence. I spent Saturday morning at the logistics yard, drinking terrible coffee and joking with my dispatchers. I felt like a massive boulder had been lifted off my chest. But by Monday morning, the storm finally hit. It started with my Aunt Tressa. Tressa is my mother's older sister, a woman who thrives on drama and considers herself the moral compass of our extended family. She is what people on the internet call a flying monkey, someone manipulated by the narcissists to do their dirty work and apply external pressure. My phone started buzzing relentlessly during a morning meeting. I ignored it until I was back in my private office. I opened my messages and found a massive group chat had been created, including my parents, Aunt Tressa, 3 cousins, and several of Cressida's friends. The messages were a flood of venom. Aunt Tressa, Veda, I cannot believe what a monster you have become. Your mother has been crying for 3 days straight. You ruined your sister's engagement over a petty misunderstanding about a chair. You embarrassed your parents in front of billionaires. You need to pay the restaurant the rest of the money and beg Lachlan's family to take Cressida back. You are a disgusting, bitter woman. Cousin Mark, seriously Veda, that was so messed up. Family is family. You do not air dirty laundry in public like that. Cressida, she is just jealous. She has always been jealous of me. Now I am $7,000 in debt to a restaurant and Lachlan will not return my calls. Are you happy now, Veda? You ruined my life. I sat at my desk, reading the messages one by one. 10 years ago, a barrage like this would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and panic. I would have drafted a dozen apologies, trying to explain my side, trying to make them understand my pain. I would have offered to pay the bill just to make the screaming stop. But not today. Today, I felt nothing but a cold, calculated sense of justice. They wanted a public audience? Fine. I would give them one. I did not reply to the group chat. Defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is a waste of breath. Instead, I opened my personal social media account. I had a decent following, mostly friends, industry peers, and the same extended family members who were currently attacking me in private. I created a new post. I attached 3 photographs. The first photograph was a picture I had quickly snapped on my phone right before I sat down at the restaurant. It clearly showed the rusted, ugly folding chair sitting next to the plastic trash can, with the swinging kitchen doors in the background. The second photograph was a screenshot of the restaurant bill, highlighting the $15,800 total. The third photograph was a blurred-out version of the pawn shop receipt, clearly showing the description of the heirloom brooch and the date it was pawned. I took a deep breath, cracked my knuckles, and typed out the caption. For the extended family members currently blowing up my phone and calling me a monster, here is the truth. I was invited to an engagement dinner where I was expected to pay a $15,000 bill. In return, my sister specifically requested the manager seat me on this rusted chair by the trash can because my presence at the VIP table would ruin her aesthetic. She also lied to her wealthy in-laws, claiming she paid for the party, all while secretly pawning her future mother-in-law's family heirloom to buy her dress. I did not ruin anyone's life. I simply refused to fund my own disrespect. I am taking the trash out of my life. Literally. I hit post. I turned my phone on silent, tossed it into my desk drawer, and went back to work. When I finally checked my phone at 5 in the evening, the fallout was apocalyptic. The post had gone viral within our social circle. Hundreds of comments. Mutual friends who had previously liked Cressida's glamorous posts were expressing absolute shock and disgust. Aunt Tressa had attempted to defend Cressida in the comments, but was immediately shut down by my friends who tore her arguments apart. Lachlan's older sister had actually shared the post, adding her own caption, "Thank you to Veda for exposing this grifter before she legally tied herself to our family. We stand with you." The flying monkeys had been grounded. The narrative my mother and sister tried to spin was destroyed by undeniable photographic proof. Cressida had deactivated all her social media profiles to hide from the overwhelming backlash. I smiled, locking my office door for the night. The public victory was sweet. But I knew the real war was not over yet. Because Talia had found something else in that financial background check. Something much, much worse than a pawned brooch. And tomorrow, my parents were going to pay for it. Tuesday morning felt different. The air was crisp. The sun was shining through the large windows of my corporate office. I was sitting at the conference table with Talia. She had a thick, manila folder resting in front of her. She looked like a predator ready to strike. "Are you ready for this?" Talia asked, tapping her manicured fingernail against the cardboard folder. "Once we pull this trigger, Veda, there is no going back. This is not just family drama anymore. This is a felony." I nodded, staring at the folder. "I am ready. Do it." The financial background check had unearthed a massive anomaly. 2 years ago, when I was transitioning Vanguard Logistics into an LLC, I had given my parents access to some of my older personal tax documents to help them file for a government rebate they claimed they needed. I trusted them. I was stupid. They had used my social security number and my established credit history to quietly open 3 high-limit credit cards in my name. They intercepted the mail, changed the billing address to a digital mailbox, and went on a spending spree. They had racked up $48,000 in luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and gifts for Cressida. They had been making the bare minimum payments just to keep the accounts out of collections, entirely using my identity to fund their fake upper-class lifestyle. Talia had drafted a comprehensive legal packet. It contained all the evidence of the identity theft, the forged signatures, and a drafted criminal complaint ready to be submitted to the authorities. "Send them a text," I said, my voice steady. "Tell them to come to the yard." An hour later, my parents' luxury SUV pulled into the dusty, gravel parking lot of Vanguard Logistics. I stood at the large glass window of my second-floor office, watching them step out. My mother was wearing a designer coat. My father was wearing expensive loafers. They looked ridiculous standing amidst the massive diesel trucks and forklifts. I did not invite them up to my office. I walked down the metal staircase and met them in the middle of the active yard. The noise of engines and shouting workers forced them to step out of their comfort zone. "Veda," my mother started, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you summoning us to this place? You have already ruined your sister. What more do you want?" I did not say a word. I simply handed my father the thick manila folder. "Open it," I commanded. Orson scoffed, but he opened the folder. He flipped through the first few pages. I watched the color drain from his face in real time. He stopped breathing. His hands began to shake so violently the papers rustled in the wind. "What is it, Orson?" Althea asked, leaning over his shoulder. She looked at the highlighted bank statements and the drafted criminal complaint. She gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. Her designer heel caught in the gravel, and she almost fell. You tracked the cards," my father whispered, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. $48,000, I said, my voice cutting through the noise of a reversing semi-truck. "You stole my identity. You committed federal fraud to buy spa weekends and designer bags for a daughter who hates you just as much as she hates me." "Veda, please," my mother began to cry, actual, genuine tears of fear this time. "We were going to pay it off. We just needed a little help. We did not want to bother you." "You are going to jail, Orson," I said, ignoring her completely. "Both of you. Talia is submitting this to the police at 5 o'clock today." My father fell to his knees in the dirt. The expensive fabric of his trousers soaked up the oil and dust. "Please, Veda. Please. I am begging you. Do not do this. We will lose everything. Our house, our reputation. I will do whatever you want. Please." I looked down at the man who had made me sleep in a freezing car because my sister needed room for yoga. I looked at the woman who told me my blue-collar business was an embarrassment. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the executioner. "Stand up," I said coldly. He scrambled to his feet, dusting his ruined pants. "Here are my terms," I said, crossing my arms. "You have 30 days. Exactly 30 days to pay off the entire $48,000 balance and close those accounts. We do not have that kind of liquid cash. My mother sobbed. You know our investments are tied up. Then sell the car, I said, pointing directly at their pristine, $80,000 luxury SUV parked nearby. Sell it today. Sell your jewelry. Take out a second mortgage. I do not care if you have to flip burgers to make the payments. If that balance is not at zero by the 30th day, this folder goes to the authorities and you will both be arrested. They stood there in the dust, completely broken. They had no leverage. They had no excuses left. And one more thing, I added, turning to walk away. Do not ever contact me again. Not for holidays. Not for birthdays. Do not ever call my phone. You are dead to me. I walked back up the metal stairs without looking back. Karma is often described as a slow, cosmic process. But sometimes, when you finally stop acting as the shield for toxic people, karma hits them like a freight train loaded with bricks. The fallout for my sister, Cressida, was swift, brutal, and undeniably poetic. Without Lachlan's wealthy family backing her, and without my credit cards to fund her illusions, Cressida's house of cards collapsed entirely. The restaurant, Laura, did not take kindly to being stiffed out of nearly $8,000. The general manager filed a civil lawsuit against her for theft of services. Normally, my parents would have rushed in to save her. They would have drained their savings to hire a lawyer and pay the restaurant to protect their golden child. But they could not. I walked in, approached the counter, and looked up at the menu board. Can I take your order? A tired, monotone voice asked from behind the register. I looked down. Standing there, wearing a hideous mustard yellow uniform, a stained apron, and a cheap paper hat, was Cressida. We stared at each other for a long, heavy moment. The silence between us felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Her hands were raw and red from washing dishes. The expensive hair extensions were gone, replaced by a messy, greasy bun. The designer makeup had faded into dark bags under her eyes. She had to get a minimum wage job. With the lawsuit from the restaurant draining her bank accounts and the massive credit card debt she had accumulated buying clothes to impress Lachlan, she had no other choice. The self-proclaimed lifestyle consultant was now wiping down sticky tables and serving black coffee to truck drivers. She looked at my tailored suit. She looked at the expensive watch on my wrist. I saw a flash of the old resentment in her eyes, but it was quickly buried under a crushing wave of profound humiliation. She looked down at the register, her face flushing red. Just a black coffee, I said evenly. I did not mock her. I did not smile. I did not point and laugh like she had done to me at that VIP table. She punched the order into the machine with trembling fingers. $2.50, she whispered, refusing to meet my eyes. I handed her a $5 bill. Keep the change, I said. I took my coffee and walked out of the diner. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the neon sign of the diner flicker in the daylight. People often say that revenge does not bring happiness. Maybe they are right. But seeing the universe force my sister to learn the value of hard work, to finally understand what it feels like to be at the bottom, felt incredibly validating. They thought I was the dirt beneath their shoes. Now she was sweeping the dirt, and I owned the building. Sometimes you do not need to seek revenge. You just need to step out of the way and let gravity do its job. If you agree that karma never misses its mark, hit that like button to let me know. The next year of my life was a period of intense, beautiful transformation. Once I severed the dead weight of my family, Vanguard Logistics exploded in growth. The strategic partnership with Mr. Evander's real estate firm was incredibly lucrative. We acquired 3 new fleets, doubled our warehouse space, and my personal net worth crossed the $5 million threshold. But the money was not the most important part. The most important part was the silence in my mind. For 33 years, I had lived with a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. A desperate need to prove my worth. I used to jump every time my phone rang, terrified it was my mother demanding something or my sister finding a new way to insult my lifestyle. I used to spend holidays walking on eggshells, biting my tongue and swallowing my pride just to keep the peace. That hum was gone. I started going to therapy. My therapist helped me unpack decades of emotional neglect. She helped me realize that being the family scapegoat is not a reflection of your flaws, it is a reflection of their dysfunction. They targeted me not because I was weak, but because my independence threatened their fragile egos. My success forced them to look at their own failures. My parents managed to pay off the $48,000 debt on the 29th day. Talia received a cashier's check from them, drawn from the sale of their luxury SUV and a massive loan they took out against their house. They were officially broke, driving an old, beat-up sedan that ironically looked a lot like the one I slept in when I was 22. They never tried to contact me again. The fear of federal prison was a highly effective boundary. I learned how to spend holidays with people who actually loved me. I spent Thanksgiving at Talia's house, surrounded by her loud, chaotic, incredibly warm family. Nobody judged my clothes. Nobody asked me for a check. They just asked me to pass the potatoes and laughed at my jokes. I bought a new house. A beautiful, modern property with a massive backyard and a quiet office overlooking the trees. I still drove my reliable pickup truck to the yard every day, but I bought a vintage sports car for the weekends. I did not buy it to show off. I bought it because I liked the way the engine sounded. One evening, I was sitting on my patio, drinking a glass of wine, when I realized something profound. I did not miss them. Society pushes this narrative that you must forgive your family, no matter what. That blood is thicker than water. That cutting off your parents is the ultimate sin. But what happens when the blood is toxic? What happens when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones holding your head underwater? Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I forgave them in the sense that I no longer carried the burning anger in my chest. I let go of the hope that they would ever change, which meant I let go of the pain they caused me. But I will never let them sit at my table again. I had spent my entire life trying to buy a seat at their table. I sacrificed my money, my dignity, and my peace of mind for a chair by the kitchen doors. It took losing my family to realize that I did not need a seat at their table. Exactly 1 year after the disastrous engagement dinner, I picked up the phone and made a reservation. I called Laura. I did not use a corporate card this time. I used my personal black card. I booked the rooftop terrace. The entire thing. I did not invite my parents. I did not invite my sister. I invited Talia, her husband, and my top 6 managers from Vanguard Logistics. The people who had stood by me, worked late nights in freezing warehouses, and helped me build an empire from the dirt up. I wore a stunning, backless emerald green gown that cost more than my first car. I walked out of the glass elevator and onto the terrace. The jazz band was playing a lively tune. The city lights sparkled below. The general manager, the exact same man from a year ago, greeted me at the entrance. He remembered me. A polite, knowing smile crossed his face. "Welcome back, Ms. Veda," he said, giving a slight bow. "Your table is ready." He led us straight to the center of the terrace. The velvet ropes were gone. The table was set with the finest crystal and silver. There were no rusted folding chairs in sight. I took my seat at the head of the table. Talia sat to my right, raising her glass of vintage champagne with a wicked grin. "To pulling the plug," she toasted. "To pulling the plug," I echoed, the crystal glasses clinking with a bright, clear sound. We ate Wagyu beef. We drank incredible wine. We laughed so loudly that the other patrons on the lower floors probably heard us. It was a celebration of survival, of hard work, and of the family you choose for yourself. As dessert was being served, I looked over at the swinging kitchen doors. The spot by the trash can was empty. The ghost of the miserable, desperate woman I used to be was gone. She died the moment she refused to pay that bill. I looked around at my friends, feeling a deep, unshakable sense of peace. I had built my own kingdom. I had set my own rules. And I was the one deciding who was allowed to sit at my table. My parents lost their wealth and their pride. My sister lost her fiancé and her fake social standing, forced to serve coffee to make ends meet. I exposed them, financially ruined them, and walked away without a single glance backward. Some of my extended family still whisper that I am cold-blooded. that I took it too far by threatening my parents with federal prison over credit card fraud, and that I should have shown mercy to my own blood. So, I leave it to you, the jury of the internet. I cut my parents out entirely and forced them to sell everything they owned to pay me back. I let my sister's life implode and left her to work a minimum wage job to survive. Was I wrong for destroying my family over a dinner bill, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Thank you so much for listening to Veda's story. If you found this story satisfying and want more incredible Reddit drama, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. See you in the next one.